Today's episode is brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. Landing a job in the NBA is no easy feat. One surefire way to put yourself in front of a competitive talent pool is if you master the collective bargaining agreement. And now you can, with a course developed by the godfather of the CBA himself, Larry Kuhn. Larry Kuhn has been teaching the CBA to teams, agents, media, and students for over 20 years, and now you can master the CBA through his online video on-demand course, which is now available to the public. If you're looking to break into basketball, or even just set yourself apart, this is the competitive advantage you are looking for. To learn more about the video on-demand course that is being taken by teams and agents all over the world, please visit sportsbusinessclassroom.com today.
Welcome back, one and all. You are listening to the NTC podcast. Me and my co-host John are back with episode 21. And this time around, we have a very special guest. We are very happy to have in the one and only Howard Beck, ladies and gentlemen. Howard is a very respected writer, analyst. He's currently a senior writer for Sports Illustrated. He's a co-host of the Crossover Pod. He's also an analyst for Sirius XM NBA. And his previous stops include a stint with Bleacher Report, the New York Times, and also LA Daily News. So very well-traveled, very well-respected, a member of the media and the NBA. And he has a wealth of knowledge that me and John are excited to kind of extract with him today and get his thoughts on a few different topics. So Howard, thanks so much for taking the time. We know your plate is full here with Sports Illustrated and your other ventures, but we're very excited to have you on the broadcast. So appreciate your time, and we're excited for this episode, for sure.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the very nice intro. Hearing all that just hammers home one thing, which is that I'm old. The well-traveled, it's just, it really, you could just say old. He's been a lot of places over a lot of years. The gray hairs are coming through my beard here. So, but no, great to be with you guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Howard. I mean, that's one way to put it. You could say old, but I like to say well-traveled. You're a veteran.
I appreciate
your way
the
around the block. Oh yeah. I try to spin it in the most positive way possible. You know, there's different ways to look at everything, but we try to take a look at it from a glass half full perspective. But in any case, should be a fun time. So what we like to do here, Howard, to start off our conversations with our guests is to dive into their background. Me and John have been a part of a program called Sports Business Classroom, which is basically an organization that helps sports enthusiasts get their foot in the door when they're aspiring to work for a team or whatever the case may be in sports. And something they like to do during their programs, like the GM Academy that was recently held in December, they like to ask their speakers about their origin story. So essentially, what is your background, how you got involved in this industry? And then it's very interesting to hear people's different backgrounds, how they got involved with it. Sometimes they just stumbled into it. Some people say it was something they wanted to do since they were a kid. But we're really curious to hear how you got started in this industry that you've been a part of for a very long time. So if you don't mind, maybe spending a couple of minutes just letting us know, how did you get involved in media? Where did that start for you? Was that a passion you had from the start, or was it something that kind of developed over time? How did that go for you specifically in terms of your story and your journey?
Yeah. By the way, the well-traveled also includes having traveled through the Sports Business Classroom myself a few summers back, speaking
nice.
and hanging out there with the crew. They do a great job. So, yeah, I mean, listen, there's a part of my career path that makes absolute sense, and there's an aspect of it that makes zero sense at all. And it starts like this. Joe Montana threw a pass to Dwight Clark that was too high for him to catch, and Dwight Clark somehow caught it. That was the 1982 NFC Championship game. I grew up in the Bay Area in San Jose. The Niners were by far, that was my team. That was what I was most passionate about, was the NFL and the Niners. That is my entry into sports and sports fandom. And saw a lot of Giants and A's growing up as well. The Raiders before they left. The Warriors, as a Bay Area kid, the Warriors were like so far off the radar for the most part during my childhood. I've already dated myself, so you can kind of, or maybe I didn't date myself entirely. I was 13, let's say, at the NFC Championship game when the catch happened. So the catch is my formative sports moment. And the NFL was my sport. The Niners were my team. The Warriors sucked. That's the bottom line. They sucked for a very, very, very long time. They did win a championship sometime during my earlier childhood, but like the NBA wasn't, it just wasn't that big of a thing back then. And certainly, this was long before League Pass, long before satellite TV, long before cable television. Right. We had an antenna on the roof. I don't even know what channel the Warriors were on. I did go to a Warriors game or two. In fact, it'd be fun if this was the piece of my origin story that mattered most, but it's not. When I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. I won a drawing at a children's shoe store where you like fill out the thing and you place a card in a fishbowl or whatever, and they draw your names. I did win a contest to be ball boy for a day at a Warriors game.
Nice.
And so that my earliest NBA memory is in fact like pushing the big broom around the key during pregame and during whatever, stoppages of play and stuff, and doing some pregame rebounding. And I got a free t-shirt or something. This is a long time ago. I think John Lucas was the Warriors point guard at the time. So once again, I am old. So it was the Niners. And when the catch happened, that sparked something in me that whole season. And that was their first Super Bowl year. That gets me reading the San Jose Mercury News, my hometown paper, just devouring the sports section every morning, not just football, but everything. And that kind of sets me on a path. And my sports fandom grew in the years after that. By the time it's time to apply to go to college and you're thinking about, well, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? What do you want to study and all this? I was good in my English classes in high school. I was a good writer. And I thought, wow, you can write about sports and get paid for it. What a ridiculous concept. So let's, I wonder if I can do that. But I went to UC Davis up near Sacramento, which does not have a journalism program. None of the UCs have undergraduate journalism programs. So I went there for other reasons. But my first goal, my first mission in landing on campus was go down to the student newspaper and apply for a job. I got that first week. I started writing for the college paper, the California Aggie, and like the rest, as they say, is history. That was what I did. That was, I majored in English, but really I majored in the Aggie. Like that was my entire college career was spent in the basement of this, student building, student activities building at UC Davis, because that was what I was most passionate about. I loved working for the college paper. I loved not just writing sports. I shifted over to news for a while and covered a bunch of news stuff. Like I loved journalism. I loved being a reporter. That was my calling. It started with sports, but it became bigger than that while I was there. And I shifted away from sports, both in college and after college, but sports kept drawing me back in. We can get to that and how my MBA writing career started, but that's really it. That's where it all begins for me.
That's super cool. I love to hear how people get started, and it's really cool for you how it was a pivotal moment, and that kind of just sparked your interest in how much you were interested in just getting involved in the sports avenue and in that area. And I could definitely speak to like just how special it can be just to kind of be in the journalism field. It's actually something I thought about doing, when I got into college, and I considered it for a long time, but I just saw how cool it would be to tell people stories and to kind of communicate different themes and messages to people. And it got me thinking, is there anything else you ever thought about doing when you went through college and you were getting started in your professional career? Was there a plan B for you, or was it journalism it's the only thing I'm dedicated to do, and this is what I have to do in my career? Like, is there any other option for you at any point, or was this what you were dead set on?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't think so. Like, I think once I got to UC Davis and started writing for the college paper, like I was just off and running. Like I was completely immersed in it. And it was, we were a daily paper. We printed 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, which even then was rare for a college paper. Sadly, I think they're only weekly now. That was my life. That was my social life. That was like my best friends in the world still to this day are my friends from the California Aggie, from the college paper. And so that was my career. It was my social life. It was my daily activity. It was everything. And it was essentially, like I said, it was like my de facto major too. Just ask any of my English professors who saw me slacking off in their classes all the time because I was too busy with the paper instead. But I don't think I ever considered anything else to answer your question. I was, I picked a direction. I threw myself into it. I loved doing it. It's hard. It's hard to get good at this. Writing, even for me, after all these years, writing is torture on some level, because every time you're starting anew, every story is its own challenge. And it doesn't matter how many times you've done it. It doesn't matter how many times you've proved in your own mind you can do this, and you can even do it at a decent level. You're still starting from scratch every time. There's a blank Word doc on my screen at some point. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that it's never quite the same. And Every story is its own challenge, every interview, every event you cover. I think the only real decision or the only debate I might have had in my own head was what I was going to cover, right? So I get into this because I loved the Niners, I loved football, and I thought, oh, I could go cover it. Like, this is the thing. When you transfer from fandom to media professional, you get into it because you were a fan. And so that your first thought is, before you realize that there's this concept of objectivity and you need to have an emotional distance and all this, your first thought is like, it'd be great to cover the team you grew up rooting for, right? So, oh man, I'll be a Niners beat writer, travel around the country and all this stuff. And that's the dream at some point. And then eventually you realize, like, oh no, you can't really be a fan while you're doing this anyway. Like, those things are in conflict, at least to me. Some people in this business might disagree, especially some younger folks. But I never ended up, I did cover a few Niners games for the Davis Enterprise, the local paper in Davis, when I was still in school, and then I was my first job after college. But I never did become an NFL writer, right? I took some other directions. There's a bunch of different detours, and then eventually I ended up covering the Lakers for the LA Daily News starting in 97. The only consideration was whether I was going to do sports or news, because I detoured to news while I was in college, and I did it again at the Davis Enterprise. I did sports there for my first year and a half, 2 years, and I kind of burned out on it. I jumped over to the news desk to cover City Hall. I covered like a bazillion city council meetings and planning commission meetings and, all kinds of stuff, land use planning and, just little local controversies. And it was fun. Like, it was fun for a different reason. So I like, a lot of people in the business now, younger folks are coming in specifically as NBA fans who want to write about basketball. And they do. And there are shortcuts to that now, or easier paths, I think, more direct paths, I should say, than there were back in my era when it was strictly a newspaper magazine world. But for me, it was more about the journalism. It didn't necessarily matter what the subject was. Yes, sports can be more fun than news, but I really enjoyed the couple of years I was doing City Hall. I was covering city council in Davis. And then when I left Davis for the Ventura County Star in Southern California, the 2 years I spent there were strictly in news as well. Mostly, again, covering local government and occasionally covering, a brush fire and, other random things. I enjoyed that too. To me, I got into the business as someone who wanted to do journalism, who wanted to report and write and be in that world. It wasn't necessarily about, oh, I have to go cover the NBA or I have to cover this exact sport. And I never did end up covering the NFL as a beat. And I'm glad I didn't, for a bunch of reasons, not least of which is that the NFL, I think, has the most strictly managed access of all the major sports. Also, you get one game and the rest of the week is like filler. It's hard. And I just think, as it turns out, like, I landed on, if I was going to spend most of my career covering professional sports, I landed on the perfect beat. Baseball is too long of a season with way too many games. Football probably has too few games. The NBA is like, the just right in the Goldilocks tale or something.
So it's awesome hearing about how, right, you kind of landed in the perfect spot. And even what I found even interesting in all of that was talking about your fandom and how, right, maybe you didn't get to cover the Warriors, but you were still right around the game you loved and something you were so passionate about, and it worked. You are now writing for the publication you grew up reading in Sports Illustrated. So how's this last year been for you?
No, it's been awesome. It's been phenomenal. I mean, when I was, say, I started subscribing to Sports Illustrated probably when I'm 12 or 13. And so for those formative years where I'm getting really into not just watching sports, but reading about sports and reading the best sports writing out there, which SI has always been the pinnacle, at some point, whenever that light bulb went on, like, maybe this is something I could do for a career. SI was, as I say, the pinnacle. There was no question about it. And so that was the dream. And I think for a lot of people of my generation, and certainly generation before me, and maybe even a couple of generations after me, before like digital and TV and everything else kind of overtook print, SI was always the dream for all of us coming up from a certain era. And the San Jose Mercury News was my hometown paper. So those were the two potential dream jobs. I never did work for the Merc, although it was really cool when, like, during my Laker beat days, especially because their stuff goes out over the news wires. And the Lakers were obviously very newsworthy. Occasionally my byline would end up in the Merc because they picked it up off the wire from the LA Daily News. And like, it was awesome, like seeing like, okay, I never did get the job at the Merc, the job that I wanted growing up, but wow, there's my byline in my hometown paper. So that was cool. SI was the pinnacle. That was the dream. it's funny because as it turns out, obviously it took me a long time to get there. But along the way, I end up with what ends up being like the other dream job, which was the New York Times. And, for most of my earlier years, the Times wasn't considered like the prime place for sports coverage, right? It was the greatest newspaper in the country. It was one of the biggest newspapers in the world. It is as prestigious as they come, but it wasn't known for sports up until, I don't know, maybe late 80s, early 90s. It started to really build up that staff. By the time I got there in 2004, like that was certainly a destination spot if you were a sports writer and wanted to, and you were aspiring to be at one of the best places. And that's still like one of the like most memorable moments of my life. The day that I got the job at the New York Times, like I can remember exactly, like where I was when I'm calling my wife to let her know. I was in New York at the time, and we were still living in LA. I called her to let her know. Like it's like a top 5 moment in my life, right? Like up there with the getting married, my daughter being born, whatever. Getting the job at the Times was this huge career transformational moment. But I at some point I kind of just I think resign myself to the idea that I was probably never going to work for Sports Illustrated, which had been the dream job. And it's just funny the way things go, right? I jumped to Bleacher Report in 2013 because they offered an amazing opportunity to do different things than what I was doing at a newspaper. I could expand into video and then podcasting, and had a great run there. They eventually decided to end BR Magazine, which was the division I worked for. They decided that was no longer part of their repertoire. I moved on and I landed at the dream job at SI.
So cool hearing about that. And I mean, it sounds like you've had so many dream jobs in a sense, right? And you're kind of making a 15-year-old Howard Beck really proud, looking ahead and saying, wow, okay. Like
his head would explode.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love it, Howard. Hey, I went on in your Twitter here recently, and I saw that you had a pinned tweet from December 14th of 2020. That's when you officially announced, at least to Twitter, that you had accepted the position with Sports Illustrated and you were starting with them. And that was kind of my moment. I was like, I need to just keep tabs on what he's going to, put out through Sports Illustrated. I want to see, what he has coming through the pipeline. And then recently, a really interesting piece you posted on there, I really caught my attention. And it's really relevant as we switch gears into All-Star talk. And, comes off faster every year, it feels like. But, just a few days away here, we have All-Star Weekend coming up here very quickly. And Fred Van Vleet is an All-Star. It's a very cool accomplishment for him. And, going back through your article, there were 2 things that stood out to me. First of all, you're talking about Van Vleet in terms of what he brings to the game at his size. A 6'6" guy, doesn't have any crazy athletic gifts. And then number 2, he's an undrafted player, which is a very cool little milestone for him. And, representing a bunch of undrafted guys that, in these days in the NBA, there's a lot of them making noise. You don't have to be a lottery pick or be a highly anticipated prospect to make noise in the NBA. So there are a couple of quotes here that I marked down that really stood out to me. And I wanted to cover, first of all, his size. And, and these are your words. You said that Van Vleet is an emerging star, but not a star in any of the ways that we would recognize. He's not a cheat code. He's not breaking the game. The game will probably survive Fred Van Vleet. So I just want to get your thoughts on, just what he brings to the game as someone that's maybe 6 feet tall. I mean, maybe the NBA is a little bit generous and gives him an extra inch. But whatever the case is, he's a very interesting prospect. And it's very cool to see someone at his size do so well. So, what was some of your big takeaways, and, what did you kind of glean from doing a study on him and maybe some other players that came before him at his size? And what does he bring to the game? And what is he telling the next generation as somebody that's quote unquote a normal sized human being, doing the things that he's doing, in basketball right now and really blowing people's minds in that regard?
Everybody in the NBA gets an extra inch or 2, I think, when the official measurements come out. Yeah. So Fred Van Vleet, he's only the 4th guy in the modern era to go from being undrafted to All-Star, and no one since Ben Wallace, like 15, 16 years ago. And so it's Ben Wallace, Brad Miller, John Starks. It's a really short list. And so we should not let that go unnoticed or taken for granted. This is really, really, really rare. And when something that rare happens, there's always the question of a couple different things. One would be maybe he shouldn't have been undrafted in the first place, right? Like, how did everybody overlook or fail to see this talent? So there's that aspect of it. But there's the flip side too, which is that there's a reason, after 2 rounds of the draft, 60 players drafted, and many second round picks, by the way, like in a given year, 30 second round picks, you're lucky if 2 or 3 of them become decent rotation guys, much less starters or stars. And occasionally an all-star emerges from the second round, but it's rare for second rounders even to have long careers, period. So to go, 60 draft spots and then not be drafted and then be signed to a free agent contract, the odds are just really low, historically speaking. So what made Fred Van Vleet stand out? And did everybody miss something? Like, there's a little bit of both. There's some things that people probably missed at the time or underestimated in him, but a lot of it is just a testament to, individual perseverance, belief, work ethic, all these phrases that we use all the time when we're talking about the great players. What separates even all-stars from rotation guys and superstars sometimes from all-stars, some of it's natural gifts. Some of it's how high you can jump or how fast you can run, or hand-eye coordination and some things that might be just built in that are just nature. But a lot of it is your own approach to the game. So much that separates the top 10 from, the bottom 10, whatever. It's always more than the physical attributes. And Fred Van Vleet is the testament to that, because as I wrote in the lead that you were partially quoting, he's not jumping over guys. He's not blowing by anybody. He's not the most athletic. He's not the most anything, but he's developed himself into a great 3-point shooter. He's really smart. He studies the game. He works his butt off. He's worked on his body. And, it's amazing. It's uncanny, in fact, how much the outline of Fred Van Vleet's stardom, his success, looks a lot like Kyle Lowry's, right? The guy he replaced, the guy he was mentored by, the guy who he counts as a close friend and played with for several years before Lowry went to Miami last summer. Lowry, same thing. Lowry's not blowing anybody away athletically. Lowry's not jumping over guys, but worked his tail off to make himself. And he was I think the 30th, 24th. So he was the late first rounder, 24th, I think. But Lowry bounced around, no, there was no sign that Kyle Lowry was going to become a perennial all-star until suddenly he was one. And that's Van Vleet as well. So I love those stories. I love the stuff that we can't see coming. I love when the unexpected is much more interesting, right? We come into this season with everybody hyped about Nets and Lakers because of their star power. And instead we're all talking about the Grizzlies and the Cavs and the Bulls. And the Warriors are back, and we could kind of maybe see that coming, but not at this level. The Suns are still good, but a lot of what's happened this season has been more of the unforeseen and the unanticipated. And to me, that's the beauty of sports. That's why we watch, because we can map it all out. We can analyze it to death. We can watch film. We can do all this stuff, run the numbers, but we turn on the game every night because we really don't know what's going to happen.
Right. That's why we play the games, right? There's no telling what's going to happen until it's actually put on the court and the guys can go at it. But I want to take it a step further. You had mentioned there's a lot of surprises this season. While we're talking about all-star reserves, how about nice shout out to Darius Garland, another, quote unquote undersized guy that, he definitely had some more hype coming out of college than Van Vleet, but there are definitely questions about what he can do at his size. There's some question marks. His first season wasn't exactly, anything crazy. I don't think anybody would anticipate that, 2 seasons later, he would explode and be leading the Cavs to, home court in the first round of the playoffs. It's really been incredible what he's been able to do. So, just wanted to get your thoughts on him as well, because, there's some similarities here in terms of, their size, what they're doing at their size and his court vision, just everything that he brings to the game. He's such a fun player to watch. And I've been very impressed with him so far, what he's done for the Cavs. He's as big of a reason as any for their emergence this season. So very cool to see that. And, I don't think anybody, maybe even the most, hopeful Cavs fans would have seen them, pushing the top, teams in the Eastern Conference. It's been an incredible story. And I felt like it was worth kind of covering just because he's been so special this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In Garland's case, there's a bunch of things that come to mind there. he was a 5th overall pick. So he's a guy who, unlike Fred Van Vleet, this is what you're supposed to be, right? If you're a lottery pick, or especially a high lottery pick, a top 5 pick, they're counting on you becoming a star or at least a high level starter. And so it took them a couple of years to break through, but that's not unusual. The Cavs went through, I think, this kind of awkward couple of years there where they're trying to figure out, is it Sexton's show to run? Is it Garland's to run? They're both smaller guards. They both operate best with the ball in their hands. And fate just kind of pushes things in this direction, right? Sexton gets injured, and now you've got clarity. And sometimes for NBA teams, that's the most important thing, especially younger teams, and especially teams that don't have an established star. When you have a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant or a Steph Curry or a Dame Lillard, everything else falls into place that much more easily, because you know who the team is running through and what it's built around. And that person makes everybody else's lives a little bit easier. When you're a young team and you don't have established stars, you have to figure that out. Maybe it's an ensemble approach. Maybe it is one guy who drives a lot of it. With the Cavs, it's interesting because their success this year, I think partially it is because, look, this is not to say Sexton being gone is a good thing, and this is not to blame Sexton for them not winning sooner, but it did bring some clarity. Garland, it's like, nope, the ball's in your hands all the time. This is your show. Run it. Except for when Rubio was obviously healthy and he was coming off the bench, but he's also, a great backup point guard who could play alongside Garland, who could mentor Garland, who's, obviously been in this league a long time too. But I do think it gave him clarity. The other thing, of course, is, look, it's their first full season with Jared Allen. They acquired Lauri Markkanen. They decided to go with this big front court, having drafted Evan Mobley. They're winning a lot with their defense, and that's a lot about the front court and all that size and length. And so Garland's all-star ascension, while earned, and certainly the stats are there to back it up, the success is there to back it up, a lot of that too is just the fact that the Cavs did a bunch of things right at the same time. They decided to invest in this big front court and go against the grain in terms of every other modern NBA trend. They, were really smart in getting in on the James Harden deal, which is how they got Jared Allen as a third wheel in that deal. They made a bid on Lauri Markkanen in a trade that, everybody just kind of thought like, oh, all right, well, maybe they'll figure out how to use this guy. It didn't work out for him in Chicago. And so a lot of things just went right. I mean, credit to the Cavs front office and their coaching staff for figuring out the best use of all these guys that none of us could have seen it coming together this way. And so Garland is the beneficiary of a lot of that, right? Some of it is his earning it by playing at a high level and leading that team and hitting big shots and running the offense. And some of it is a lot of other stuff went well around him, because if he's got the same numbers, but they don't have the defensive backbone that they put together, and they've got, 10 fewer wins, he's not making the All-Star team. Their success is what boosted him to that.
Definitely. And it's awesome thinking about just the All-Star game in general. It's so much fun kind of with that coming up and the excitement kind of boiling over it. And you were talking about some guys, right? Like a Fred Van Vleet, who have that kind of that edge, that killer instinct that kind of puts them over the top. It got me thinking about someone else that is going to be honored at the All-Star game through the new All-Star game trophy, and someone you've been covering for years, and Kobe Bryant. And I was curious, right when you saw the new trophy they made for him in his honor, what maybe your first reaction was, and what you thought about the detail that was put into that.
Amazing amount of detail and amazing amount of thought. As you guys know, if you saw the announcement the other day, it's everything about it is trying to evoke a year of his career, or a year that he was, champion and MVP, whatever. The measurements, the number of levels, everything in it has all these subtle nods to him. And, aesthetically, I think it's a nice looking trophy. I'm no judge of trophy aesthetics, but it's nice. But honestly, I think they overdid it. I think they overthought it. Every single detail was a nod to either 8 or 24, or the time he won the All-Star Game MVP in 2002. And so we're going to have 2 inches of this. It's at a glance, it's nice that all these things are built into it, but you actually need this entire lengthy press release to understand all the tributes and all of the homages to Kobe. It shouldn't require that much explanation. It just shouldn't. If the idea is to honor Kobe and have it be something that evokes Kobe's memory every time you think about this guy just won All-Star Game MVP, and now he receives the Kobe Bryant trophy, and they hand it to him, you shouldn't need to go oh yeah, right, what does all that stuff mean? There's nothing on the trophy that makes you think about Kobe. You have to have the study guide to understand any of it. So I think the NBA might have overthought this a little bit, but credit to them for being creative, I guess.
Well, there's a lot of things, right, with the All-Star game. They've kind of been adding new things all the time, right? Whether it's with the dunk contest, the three-point contest, there's always some sort of evolution for it. And the Rising Stars game format's also seen a little bit of a twist this year. And do you think you need a study guide for that one, or like, what do you think of that change?
Well, the day they announced the new format, they created one of these graphic cards that was on their tweet that we could all then retweet, and people's response immediately. But people did this with the Elam ending too a couple of years ago, where they're like, if I have to read this much, then they've already failed, which I get. Although the Elam ending is kind of fun, and it's certainly given us a little bit. It's a decent new wrinkle for the game, although it only works if the game is close enough for it to matter. Anyway,
True.
The new format for Rising. I mean, look, the Rising Stars game. I don't watch All-Star Friday Night. I haven't in a long time, but part of that's just me being old and jaded, and I've been to too many of these things. So I don't watch the celebrity game. I don't watch the Rising Stars. I don't watch anything that happens on Friday night. I don't care. That said, for people who do want to watch the rookies and sophomores, having a different format, I think, is a good thing. It needed a little bit of new life. I don't think it's never been a must-watch event. So they've got whatever, like 4 7-player teams or something like that, and they'll play against each other, and it's fine. I probably still won't watch it.
I don't blame you. Like, a lot of these showcases, it's just a glorified pickup game. I mean, who wins, who lost, who loses, it's not really going to make a difference in the long term. So
nor is it indicative of what their careers are going to be, by the way. Like, that's not,
True.
If you dominate the rookie sophomore game, you may just as easily fade into obscurity for all we know. Like, I don't have it in front of me, the history of it, but like, it's not an indicator of anything. So I just don't put much stock in any of it.
For sure. I totally understand that. I mean, if you go back and we look at the history of the Rising Stars, I'm sure we could find a team that had, half the team was made up of guys that are out of the league now. I mean, I'm sure that would, come across at some point if we went back far enough. Exactly. I do like the wrinkle, though. They added in 4 G League Ignite players. So I guess it's another showcase for them to kind of be on a big stage with a bunch of NBA scouts, coaches watching, and, possibly, kind of accelerate their career a little bit and just give them a chance to showcase their game. So I do like that wrinkle of it, giving a different spin on things and giving that group of players, I guess, a time to shine. So from that perspective, I am happy to see that. And it's just another win for the G League Ignite and the G League in general, just becoming a real powerhouse in terms of developing players and giving them a platform to show what they can do. So I guess I'll give them a point on that one, although the roles and the format is still a little bit kind of, a little bit iffy. It does take some deciphering.
Yeah, I mean, look, shout out to Scoot Henderson, who's on the G League Ignite, who I profiled in a magazine story back in, I think, around November. But great kid. I got to know a little bit over a couple of months over the summer reporting that story. He's the only one. He's the first ever to join the G League Ignite after his junior year. Like, he skipped his final year of high school. He graduated early. He doubled up his classes to join the G League Ignite. For people who aren't familiar, the Ignite is the one G League team that's devoted to guys who are not yet draft eligible, guys who have not yet reached their 19th birthday and graduated from high school and been a year removed from high school or from what their graduating class would have been. And so Scoot Henderson and others who are essentially, they're just not draft eligible. The G League Ignite is the way to avoid the NCAA quagmire or going overseas. There's the Overtime Elite League, which does some of the same stuff now, but the NBA has put a lot into this and want these G League Ignite players obviously to succeed and become high draft picks, but also to entice other 17 and 18-year-olds out there who don't want to go to the NCAA and don't want to go play overseas. If they want to play immediately professionally, the Ignite is the path, and you can get paid pretty good money to do it. So by putting 4 of those guys in, making them part of All-Star Weekend, putting them in the Rising Stars game, that is yet more incentive to show families who are considering this path. Hey, look, if your kid is good enough, he might be part of All-Star Weekend before he even ever gets to the NBA. So that's certainly, I think, part of the thought process here.
For sure. And one quick thing, I can't help but backtrack a little bit. We just talked about Kobe Bryant and, dedicating that trophy to him. I noticed one other thing on your Twitter page, Howard, and promise I'm not stalking you. I know this is all coincidence, but I noticed that you had your profile picture on there. I believe it's you I think doing an interview with Kobe there, a little bit back in the day, and I wanted to just quickly just ask you about that. We recently had the 2nd anniversary of his passing, and the NBA world really misses his presence. Is there any takeaways that you have from maybe your times you interviewed him or you got to interact with him one-on-one, anything you remember just from the time with him that, stands out to you, maybe some things that you will never forget, those special moments that you had with, the one and only Black Mamba?
So that photo is from 2001. It was somebody from NBA, from one of the NBA photographers. I don't know which one shot it, or I'd shout them out. But that is a shot of me next to Kobe. You can see the jacket he's wearing. It's like the championship jacket. So that is minutes after they clinched the championship in 2001 in Philadelphia. So that's the visiting locker room in Philadelphia. And in that moment, it was literally just me and him standing there, because the beat writers, the traveling beat writers, folks who covered every single game, got the special privilege of getting to go into the locker room early before the rest of the media descended. You got a special sticker, you go in there, you get to watch them spraying champagne all over each other and everything else. And in that moment, the rest of the Lakers are all in this like hopping scrum, singing DMX over on one side of the locker room, bouncing around, all hyped up and everything. And Kobe's just having this quiet moment off in the corner. And so I went over to approach him to see if I could to chat a little bit. But he was just, you can even see the expression on his face. He's just kind of in his own world. That's their 2nd championship of the 3. And it's in Philadelphia, kind of, more or less his hometown. He grew up, in a suburb. So anyway, I love that shot, other than the fact that I kind of look like an alien because of the way the wide angle lens was used or whatever. Like my head looks like it's expanding back behind me. It's very strange. Maybe it's the shadows. Anyway, great shot of Kobe, terrible shot of Howard Beck. But a great moment. I covered Kobe for 7 years, 97 to 04. So the entire three-peat, the entire Shaq Kobe era. And it's hard to, in a space of a few minutes, to try to sum up any piece of that. One of the things I always remember, one is that you don't really know when a guy like rises to Kobe's status, the legendary status he had. When I first started covering the Lakers, he's 19 years old and he's still coming off the bench, and he's still kind of a skinny teenager, still trying to find his way. A lot of great things were expected of him, but none of that was guaranteed. And none of this was, I don't want to say it wasn't foreseeable. I think Jerry West foresaw that this was possible, clearly, but you don't realize it. And in the moment, like, the job is all consuming on my end of it. So day to day, you're just trying to keep up with it all. And so you very rarely get to sit back and go, holy shit, like, I'm covering like some really special teams here and some really special moments. You're always on deadline. You're always just trying to keep up. You're always, trying to stay ahead of the game in terms of the news side of it. Shaq and Kobe are having all their fights and everything else. And so you're immersed in that. You're just trying to do the job. And so you very rarely get to sit back. So it's not until after I left LA in 04 and then watching Kobe continue to evolve and win 2 more championships. And of course, I covered both of those finals for the New York Times, but I'm covering him more from a little bit of a distance. We had a good relationship. We got to sit down and chit chat every so often along the way. But I think I appreciated him more from a distance and after the fact and after he retired. And so, yeah, in the moment, you don't realize how special it is and the history that you're seeing unfold before you. And the fact that you're not part of it, but you're kind of along for the ride and you're so close to it that it feels like you lived it as well. So, I treasure all of that. Although at the time it was just constant stress of trying to, like I say, make deadline, not get scooped, try not to get killed in the, Shaq Kobe wars or get killed in the massive media scrums that were surrounding either one of them at any one time when TV cameras are descending on you and trying to shove you out of the way. It was chaos at times. But it was amazing. And I got to see a lot of incredible basketball. I guess if I'm going to tell one quick Kobe anecdote, I'll tell two. There's the one at the beginning, and I highlighted this in the column, my reminiscence of him on the day he died. was just one of my earlier memories, which was that first year I was covering them, and the Lakers are practicing at LA Southwest College. They don't have their own practice facility yet. And so that there's junior college in South LA, and there were a bazillion doors leaving this gym. And so at any given time, you may be talking to Robert Ory or Derek Fisher or Del Harris or somebody, and other players could be walking out behind you and you don't even see them leave. And I've been covering the team for a few months, and I think we were standing in front of Robert Ory talking to him. My back is turned, and I heard this from behind me, "Hey, Howard, you need me today?" And it was Kobe. And it was like at that stage of his career, he's, 19, 20, and not the Kobe with a capital Kobe that we think of, and years away from becoming the Black Mamba and all this stuff. We had a good rapport, and he was checking in. And I think somebody could cynically say like, he's trying to, suck up to the media or something, or trying to build a good relationship or something. But, I don't think so. Like, that was truly who he was back then. He wanted to connect. He wanted to have that relationship, and he was courteous. He was genuinely courteous. Like, "Do you need me today?" And I think I said, "No, I'm good." And then the other quick one is that at the end of his career, in that 2015-16 season, and he's on kind of his retirement tour, he'd already come through New York, and I had done a couple stories during his weekend here when he played the Knicks and the Nets, and wrote about some things that were New York oriented. And I got some time with him then. And I didn't figure I was going to see him again or cover it. And I wasn't going to go cover his finale, that final game against Jazz. But 2 weeks before his final game, I was out in LA on a different story. It was actually, I think, something Clipper oriented. And so I decided to swing by a Laker game, pop into the locker room, waited for the scrum to clear from his locker after the game, just so I could walk up and say, "Hey man, been amazing. Thank you for everything along the way, and it's been a blast covering you. Good luck in whatever's next. Hopefully, we'll stay in touch on some level or whatever." I was just there, just kind of like say goodbye and say thanks. And he got all like kind of indignant, and it was kind of like a jokey indignance, but he would like kind of smack me with his hand on the back of his hand on my chest, like, something to the effect of, and I wrote about this that night, about, "Hey, you can't be here at 19 and not be here at wait, how did he say it? You can't be here at 17 and not be here at 37, for referring to his age at the beginning and the end, something like that. And he says, "Finish the journey, man, finish the journey." So he was basically saying like, "You got to come to my finale in a couple of weeks." And like, I had no plans of doing that. I live in New York. It's a long flight. I wasn't going to go out just for that game. And, John Black, the Lakers' longtime PR guy, was standing right there, and he laughed. He goes, "Well, guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks." So I did. I told my editor, I said, "Listen, I think I'm going to go cover this game. I think, let's get me back out there." So I did. And obviously, very incredibly thankful that I made that trip, that Kobe kind of bullied me into going back, because that was an amazing night. It was surreal. It was wild. It was like nothing anybody could have expected. I did write about that whole back and forth between us that night for that game. So anyway, there's a couple of them.
So it seems like you've had some pretty cool conversations over there, right, in New York City, right, covering basketball in the halls of MSG. I mean, when I saw you a few weeks ago, some pretty historic things happened that night when Steph Curry broke the all-time threes record. And I'm curious, right, outside of maybe some of the press conferences you had, like what that night was like for you.
So I do some stuff on the side for NBA radio, for SiriusXM NBA radio. And I was fortunate enough, because I live here and because Steph Curry happened to break the record here, and it was clear that was going to happen, that they asked me to do the post game with Steph for NBA radio. So that was very cool. Because especially on a night like that, granted, media numbers are way down right now because of COVID. So there are fewer credentials being issued. The crowds are smaller. That actually, perversely helps us in some level, because, there's fewer of us in there. Obviously, I wish things were back to normal and there were more people allowed, but fewer people. But even within that, on a night when Steph Curry is breaking the all-time 3-point record, not a great chance of getting him one-on-one after he does his press conference. But NBA radio had asked me, "Hey, look, because they've got their own, relationship with the league and with the teams, they're like, we're going to get Steph. Can you be the one to go talk to him?" So, yeah, absolutely. So that was cool. and got a few minutes with him there, and then used that to also get a couple extra quotes for myself for my SI story that day. And Steph is great. Steph is one of the most gracious superstars I've seen in this league in the 25 years I've been covering it. And there've been a lot of guys who are really good with the media, who are very accommodating. Everybody's got their own way of approaching it, but he is absolutely at the top end of most gracious, most approachable, and easygoing superstars that I've ever dealt with. And so that was fun. That was great, and that was a really cool night there.
Fantastic. Hey, we're coming to the end of this podcast, but to end things off, I wanted to kind of cover not the whole trade deadline scenarios and speculation, because we could be here another 30 minutes for sure. There's so many guys that could be on the block, or hours. Yep, quite a while. But I just wanted to zoom in and focus on one trade in particular. And it's kind of timely because it's actually the news broke from Woj probably about 10 or 15 minutes before we went on the air. But this is an interesting deal that was conducted between the Clippers and the Blazers. So it looks like that Bledsoe, Winslow, and Keon Johnson are going to the Blazers in return for Norman Powell and Robert Covington. So over at NTC, we cover these trades a lot. We update our website with draft capital and salary cap and things. But I wanted to just kind of zoom in and look at this from a basketball perspective, just on-court perspective. I go on Twitter right after it breaks, and I'm looking at the retweets and stuff, and everybody says that it's a steal for the Clippers. I mean, they're getting two really good, solid rotational guys, wings, in Norman Powell and Covington. I mean, that can help a ton, especially if they get Paul George and Kawhi back this season. And it looks like the Blazers maybe just kind of shedding salary, maybe look like they're kind of shifting in a different direction. So, I mean, are you of the belief that this is a clear win for the Clippers, or maybe is there another aspect of this trade that people aren't quite understanding, from the Blazers' perspective?
I wish I could tell you that there was some hidden wrinkle here or something that, that I could see that others could not. I don't see it. In fact, I don't see what the Blazers' incentive was here at all, other than luxury tax savings, which, hey, look, is a legitimate part of managing a team, managing a cap, and everything else. But Covington and Powell have value in this league. And, look, benefit of the doubt, I'm sure that the Blazers scoured the league and tried to gauge how much they could get for them. And maybe this was the best they could get. I'm skeptical that this is the best they could get, though. This is a home run deal for the Clippers. And kudos to the Clippers, too, for any other team that has lost its best player, Kawhi Leonard, for the entire season, most likely, and then lost their other all-star, Paul George, for what is going to be the majority of, and maybe even the whole season, but still is making, is a buyer at the deadline and is still looking to improve the roster at the deadline. Any other team, almost any other team, especially when they're already in the tax, would say, you know what, this isn't our year. We don't have Kawhi. He's probably not coming back this season. We don't have Paul George. Even if he comes back, we're going to be a low seed. We're not going to make a run without Kawhi anyway. Let's just, pack it in, sell off a few parts, replenish, get some youth, maybe even, shed some salary, and we'll work on it again in the off season, and we'll shoot for next year. Next season's our year. This is not our year. This is clearly not our year. And that would be a perfectly reasonable approach. But it's not what the Clippers did. And Steve Ballmer, who, look, he is the richest owner in the NBA, but he just increased his luxury tax bill by, I don't know, another 15 or 20 million or something. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he did that knowing full well this team's not winning a championship this season unless there's some miracle return of both Kawhi and Paul George, and that they're both somehow playing at their peak in April and May. I don't think the Clippers are a deep playoff team, but they said, screw it. We got a chance to get a couple of other really good players who can be with us into next season when presumably Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are healthy. That is rare, guys. That's rare in this league. Most teams in that position would have been selling or just standing pat and kicking back and saying, let's play for next season. So kudos to the Clippers. And, Ty Lue, by the way, who I covered once upon a time a million years ago when he was a Lakers rookie in his first couple of years in the league. Ty Lue has been a stealth coach of the year candidate, and I think should be in that conversation from now through the end of the season. I don't know that he'll win it. Usually it goes to somebody with a better record, and I don't think the Clippers record will be there. It'll probably more go to, could go to Bickerstaff in Cleveland, could go to, Taylor Jenkins in Memphis could go to Billy Donovan in Chicago. Like there's a lot of different ways, as there's always 6 or 7 potential coach of the year candidates. But Ty Lue should be in that conversation. What the Clippers are doing, how competitive they've been, that some of the teams they've beaten without either of their stars and just a collection of role players and Reggie Jackson, basically their leading man, like is really admirable.
100%. And, from the Blazers perspective, I'm just as confused as you are. And I saw a tweet a little bit earlier that says, oh, so we basically traded Gary Trent Jr. for Eric Bledsoe in a nutshell. They're just very confused. And I'm like, if you look at it that way, it really just is kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But yeah, I totally agree with your thoughts on the Clippers and what they're doing here. Definitely to be commended. And, one point that you did highlight was the fact that these guys are under multi-year contracts. So this isn't a situation where they're getting guys that are expiring contracts that they're going to have to evaluate and then see where they are next year. They're going to be here for, I would think, at least a season or two, as opposed to Bledsoe. It looked like, the Clippers would probably just, cut him because I think he had a non-guaranteed for next season, if I'm not mistaken. So it definitely gives them options in the long term. But yeah, definitely surprised that they weren't able to get more. Norman Powell, Covington. I remember Covington being worth, a first-round pick by himself. And then Norman Powell is a good solid player under a multi-year contract with some solid years under him. So we'll have to see how it goes. But in any case, the Clippers, I guess they don't back down. They don't take no for an answer. And all the way up from management to the players, they're going to make the most of the season, even if it doesn't result in a championship or some kind of deep playoff run like some people like to see from a team like that.
I love it. And the fact is, look, when they do get healthy, they're going to come back next season that much stronger. That's a really deep rotation now with some really great weapons. Like, it's way too soon for us to start talking about who the favorites for the 2022-23 season are. But the Clippers did a heck of a lot just now to help themselves, just stay competitive in the meantime and be that much stronger next season. And, be that much lighter of a workload potentially, or less burden on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to carry so much of the offense or the defense. Powell and Covington are both capable wing defenders too. So like it really does strengthen them, I think, more for next season than now. But either way, great move by the Clippers. Kudos to them. Don't understand what the Blazers are doing at all. Maybe there'll be more moves behind this. Maybe they just needed to loosen things up so that they can be more aggressive in some other fashion. Maybe this is the start of a major teardown. We've got, 6 days to go to the trade deadline, so we'll see.
We shall see. And of course, there's always another topic to talk about. But, as far as this installment, we're going to wind it down here. But John and I, Howard, are very thankful that you were able to give the time to us today. So thanks so much again for joining us. And it's been an awesome conversation. And we're always looking to connect with and established professionals like yourself and, also people that have been a part of Sports Business Classroom. That's always a plus for us. And we like to kind of keep that connection going. We do have a website, called No Trade Clause. So that's where me, John, our other members of our team, actually probably right after this call here, we're going to go in there and update the information with this trade. With the trade deadline, we're going to put those in. We just had a mock trade deadline, between the 5 of us the other night. So we're going to be posting some details about that. We're always trying to try out new content. So that's where that can be found over at notradeclause.com. Sportsbusinessclassroom.com is where you can find information on their programs. They're always hosting events throughout the year that helps people kind of get their foot in the door into basketball and into sports. So highly encourage you guys to check that out if you haven't already. Great speakers like Howard and other guys have given their time to that program. So definitely worth your time and money. And then for No Trade Clause, we have our socials posted here on the ticker. No Trade _clause. I believe that's our Instagram handle. And then on Twitter, it's just No Trade Clause, all one word. So highly encourage you guys to check out our content on there. Our guy Ali is always working on graphics for the different events coming up. So he does some great work on there that you guys can check out. So that brings us to the end of our episode. Howard, many thanks to you and congrats on what you've been able to do in your career. And, all the best as you continue throughout your career. And hopefully you can, interact and interview more great talents like Kobe and the other guys you come up with. So thanks so much once again.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, John. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. Hope everybody enjoyed it. And can't wait to see what the next few days holds before the trade deadline. A lot of excitement yet to come, I think, for all of us. Look forward to reading about it on your site as well.
Yes, appreciate that. And we're all holding our breath here. So until next time, everybody, and have a great day. And we'll see you in the next installment of No Trade Clause. So take care.